Welcome to Read Poems Every Day. Happy Bloomsday. As I record this, it is June 16th, 2026. Approximately 124 years after the date of James Joyce's Ulysses. And to celebrate, I thought we might take a look at Mina Loy's. I think she wrote this the same year Ulysses was published as a full novel in 1922, and then I believe it wasn't published until 1923. I might be wrong about this. Let's scroll down and see if there's actually any dates at the bottom. I don't see any. Okay. All right. Well, let's read the poem, and we might just do some simple bean counting, and then maybe just a comment or two about the poem. It's one of the most interesting contemporary to Joyce's novel and to Joyce, most interesting comments on the novel, both praising and potentially satirizing the project as well. But let's just get into it. This is Mina Loy, Joyce's Ulysses. The normal monster sings in the green Sahara, the voice and offal of the image of God make Celtic noises in these lyrical hells. Hurricanes of reasoned musics reap the uncensored earth. Loquent consciousness of living things pours in torrential languages. The elderly colloquists, the spirit and the flesh, are out of tongue. The spirit is impaled upon the phallus. Phoenix of Irish fires lighten the Occident with Ireland's wings, flap pandemoniums of Olympian prose, and satinize the imperial rose of Gaelic perfumes. England, the sadistic mother, embraces Erin. Master of meteoric idiom, present the word made flesh and feeding upon itself with erudite fangs, the sanguine introspection of the womb. Don Juan of Judea upon a pilgrimage to the libido, the press purring its lullabies to sanity, Christ capitalized, scourging in contrite usurers of destiny in hole and corner temples, and hang the soul's advertisements outside the ecclesiast's zoo. A gravid day spawns guttural gargoyles upon the Tower of Babel, Empyrean Emporium, where the rejecter recreator Joyce flashes the giant reflector on the sub rosa. All right. The the lines I've highlighted here, or at least most of them, a majority of them are marking every 10th line. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40, uh, 50, 60. So there are 61 lines in the poem. 61 lines. I don't need to write in the poem. 61 lines. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 stanzas, about 2 to 6 lines each. 2 to 6 lines each. The lines are quite short, usually less than reap the uncensored earth, the loquent consciousness. Fewer than six or sometimes six or fewer beats. Although I imagine there are there are exceptions to that. I was sorry, I was sort of lost my words, which probably isn't too surprising given how sort of rich this poem is. coming back to its own Olympian prose and its own meteoric idioms, its own erudite fangs, which it is using to both honor, but also I think in an interesting way mock the novel. And when I say mock, I don't mean necessarily in a mere mean spirited way. Um, I'm not sure what I mean, and I probably won't come back to that, but I'll just put it out there. So 61 lines, 18 stanzas, 2 to 6 lines each. Interestingly, I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but there are 18 episodes in Joyce's novel. Short lines, 6 or fewer beats. What else do we want to think about? Hmm. Let me blow this up just a little bit. Do we want to track enjambments? I mean, it's tricky, right? Because there aren't punctuation marks here, but we can kind of go through, I think, and think about it, right? Monster sings is definitely enjammed. My sense is there is a pause at the end of line 2. O full of, so that's lines 3 to 4. Hmm. Do you think God and make? Probably. If all of them end up being enjambed, I will probably stop doing this. Make Celtic noises. So far I'm noticing a great deal of enjambment here, and you could probably hear it in my reading of it too. Where I had to make some decisions about where to pause, where not to. I mean, this next one is actually interesting. The image of God make Celtic, the offal and the voice and offal make Celtic noises in these lyric hells. Um, Hurricanes. I think should be a pause there, whether it's a hard stop, like a end stop, or just a comma or something. It does seem there hells and hurricanes are not sort of enjammed there, but hurricanes and of certainly are. So that's lines 7 to 8, and then music's reap 8 to 9, and then I think there is a hard pause there between the incensored earth and the loquient consciousness. But then, yeah, I think I am gonna probably stop here. 10 to 11. So what I'm noticing is that there is a high frequency of enjambment within stanzas, but lower frequency across stanzas. So usually the stanzas are at least in the first part of the poem that I'm tracking here, the stanzas are their own kind of sort of syntactic group. Uh, that's probably not quite the right way to put it. I mean that is the right way to put it, but that Loy wants there to be at least some sort of syntactic or phrasal restarting at the beginning of, or reset at the beginning of a stanza, and some sort of pause at the end of one, which may explain one of her techniques for organizing a poem that has very little punctuation into stanzas that also have variable lines in them. But speaking of punctuation, let's see if we can find some punctuation. So going back to the top, nothing, 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 nothing. We do have an apostrophe in line. Um, in line 20. Okay. Caught me up there. Bring me back down. Apostrophe. This is line 21, I believe. And then 21, or no, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. We have a dash in line 26. Is that it? I'm seeing another apostrophe. Is that line? Let me see. I do have my copy of my book here where my lines are numbered. I believe, yeah, that's line 50. And then a hyphen in line 58. And that's the rejector, recreator, where Joyce is named in the poem and not just in the title. Okay, so very few punctuation marks here. And then pronouns. Pronouns, I'm not sure there are any pronouns in this poem, which says a lot to us, I think, about the situation. We have sort of its, and that's the press. That is line. Again, I'm going to cheat and look at my physical copy here. I'm noticing some variance between the printed version and the version that's on the screen here. The lines, I mean, the words are largely the same. There are just some spelling variants, and what I'm noticing is that the press here is capitalized in my edition in the printed book, and then there are three dashes after press, which is interesting, and actually several more dashes in this version that do not appear in the Poetry Foundation's version here. So I might go through and add those into my notes. Anyway, sorry, this was me trying to find the line for the pronoun it. So this is line 44. We have an itself, and this is the word, and this is line 30, 34. And then, let me see, I'm curious about that dash. So in my version here, this dash actually appears before the word England in line 27, and then there's another dash after Aaron, which makes sense. Even though way these are referred to, England and Aaron, with the capital E kind of beginning and ending an embedded dash off clause seems seems to make sense with how the poem is organizing itself. That might be it with respect to pronouns. Yeah. So we don't see many pronouns. Uh, Very few, or let's just say few pronouns and few instances of punctuation, though more in the published edition. Um, and by published, I guess maybe I should put the one edited by Conover. Conover. Few instances of punctuation. The title sort of explicitly names the situation of the poem, and requires the reader's knowledge of Joyce as a contemporary of the poet Loy, of sort of novelist poet Joyce, as a contemporary of the poet Loy. What else might we say here? The normal technique of tracking or orienting oneself to the situation of a poem through counting, punctuation, and pronouns um, doesn't really work here. Though the low frequency does suggest that the poem is not engaged in the typical I, thou, or I, you lyric situation. Not quite apostrophe, not quite apostrophe, since the novel and the novelist and his creations are referenced in the third person. Okay, so we'll put that there. So these are just some basic observations about Loy's work. So it's the press. I'm now realizing for some reason that the shortcuts I was doing were sort of embedding links there, which I did not intend to do. 61 lines, 18 stanzas, short lines, um, uh, frequent enjambment within stanzas, low frequency of apostrophes, only two pronouns that I can catch, and they were third person pronouns. And then just some reflections on the consequences of this and what the poem sort of requires of us. I will say, just as a sort of final reflection, the poem does seem to be an almost Joycean like aggregation of references both to the novel, but also efforts to describe or name the effects of the novel or the style or aesthetic ambition of the novel. The idea, even the opening oxymoron of normal monster, speaks to the way that Joyce's novel tracks the everyday, but elevates it, expands it in this sort of like hyperbolic mythic framing. But it's not just the mythic framing, the sort of Homeric framing that gives a kind of mock heroic amplification to the everyday, but also Joyce's sort of range of engagements with modernity, including the sort of explicit reference to the libido and to Freud further down the poem, where Joyce is interested in how deep the well of consciousness goes on any given day. So you have these very normal characters, and yet beneath each one of them is sort of this galaxy of interconnecting um, references and memories and free associations, and then also the novelist's, the artist's own fun in punning, in creating a kind of memory bank that allows you to track and cross-reference moments in the novel. So this phrase "normal monster" both describes the content of the novel, but also to some degree the the novel itself, the content of the novel, and also maybe holds up a mirror to the reader too. And then of course we have references to Ireland throughout, as well as to a sort of the colonial situation, um, uh, that the novel also speaks to, and then lots of references to language throughout as well. And this reference to Leopold Bloom, the main protagonist of the novel, the Don Juan of Judea, is a pretty clever reference. All right, 20 minutes on Mina Loy. There's some bean counting. There's just some general thoughts about the poem. If you're a fan of Joyce or not a fan of Joyce, or a fan of modernism or not a fan of modernism, maybe spend a little time reading about Joyce, reading about Ulysses, if not actually reading the novel itself. And if nothing else, we've read Mina Loy together. Let's read more poems tomorrow.